Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Ian, I'm Ian the Reader, and today I'm coming at you with 2 book reviews. Not 1, but 2. So I think this is how I'm gonna do book reviews just because I'm not sure if I wanna do like spoiler talks of books necessarily, and so I think just to make the video a little bit longer and a little bit more interesting, I'm gonna cover 2 books at a time unless it's a book that I feel I have a lot to say about, then I'll go ahead and do like its own video. But primarily I think I'm gonna go ahead and do dual book reviews. So today, the books that I'm gonna be talking about are Billy Summers by Stephen King. This is his newest release, and I'm so glad I read it. And The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I listened to The Last House on Needless Street in the last week of October, and I started Billy Summers by Stephen King in the last few days of October, and then I finished it up as my first book in November. I've been meaning to read both of these for months, so I'm so glad I picked them up. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the first review. To start, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about Billy Summers by Stephen King. I'm gonna read the flap for this one because this book kind of goes a lot of places that I didn't expect and you don't get from the summary, and so I don't want to just tell you about it and accidentally spoil kind of where the story goes, so I'm just going to read what is on the flap. Billy Summers is a man in a room with a gun. He's a killer for hire and the best in the business, but he'll do the job only if the target is a truly bad guy, and now Billy wants out. First, there is one last hit. Billy's among the best snipers in the world, a decorated Iraq war veteran, a Houdini when it comes to vanishing after the job is done. So what could possibly go wrong? How about everything? Okay, so that's the premise of this novel, and like I said, there's a lot more to it because honestly, the description that is given kind of covers like the first half of the book, and then everything else after that is not even hinted about in that part. And so with this book, I went into it with pretty high expectations, I would say. I'd seen a lot of really good reviews for this book. I had seen a couple negative ones as well, but primarily people are feeling pretty positively about it. And so I was hopeful, and it's Stephen King, so I'm always hopeful, you know. He is a fantastic author, one of my favorites. So yeah, I had high expectations. Did the book meet my expectations? Mostly. So let me talk about the things that I liked first. So in Billy Summers, you get a lot of different characters, and one of the things that Stephen King does just spectacularly well is build communities. He's really good at like establishing a set of characters or scenarios that involve a lot of different people and really fleshing them out and making them feel authentic and making you feel connected to them and making the relationships between the characters feel really genuine. And he does that really well in Billy Summers. So the reason that happens in this book is because Billy has to basically live in this community where the assassination is going to be taking place for months leading up to the actual job. And so he has to go undercover as this person who's writing a book, and he has to just like lay low but also not seem suspicious by like, you know, interacting with his neighbors and stuff. And Stephen King does such a fantastic job of developing like communities. And he does that here. I really enjoyed a lot of the relationships that Billy built with his neighbors and with the families there and the different people he interacted with. I thought that all of that was really well done, and it helped to flesh out Billy's character because he's very much like a closed book to everybody else, but you kind of see like who he is on the inside, and I really enjoyed that part, particularly one relationship he had with another character that I'm not going to get too much into because I don't want to spoil it, but I really thought that the relationship there was really believable. I thought it was very moving, and I thought it was really, really well done. He did a great job with that. Another aspect of the story that I really enjoyed was the story within a story aspect. So you have the main storyline with Billy, but as part of his cover, he's a writer, and he chooses to actually write, and what he writes is kind of his life story. And so you get him growing up, you get his experience in the military, and all those things, and Stephen King always does such a good job of layering a story into another one in a way that feels really natural and is really engaging. To be honest, some of my favorite moments from this book were not the main storyline, but were Billy's background and his history. I thought that was so compelling. I thought some of the moments were really moving, and honestly, like I said, were some of the strongest parts of the story. I also really enjoyed the pacing of this book. I thought that, you know, it went in some directions and at a speed that I didn't anticipate. You know, in some ways, I did see some things coming, and in others, I did not see them coming at all. So I think he really did a good job with that. I also think he really did a great job with Billy's character in general, because the whole like central conflict of this isn't even really the mission he's on. It's more with him kind of grappling with whether or not he's a good person, right? Because like as it said in the description, he's a gun for hire, but he will only kill like bad people. but at the same time, like, it's still killing. And so he kind of grapples with himself on like what he thinks about himself, what he wants other people to think about him, how he presents himself and how he perceives himself, and just kind of the inner turmoil that he experienced, I thought was really well executed for most of the book. Now to get into the things that I wasn't so keen on. So the first thing that I wasn't so happy about with this book was kind of the wrap up. So the book kind of starts going in a lot of directions that I really liked, and there were a lot of things that I enjoyed about it, and then there was the ending. And I think a lot of people will enjoy the ending of this book and appreciate it, but for me, at the end, I kind of felt like I was asking myself, like, what was the point, you know, of some aspects of it at least. You know, there was definitely like some momentum and some payoff, but at the same time, I just wonder, you know, like, about certain things that were handled in certain ways. I wonder why King chose to conclude them that way, and kind of where some of our characters end up. I had a lot of concerns with it, you know, and I felt like there wasn't enough resolution. And I felt like the journey that some of the characters went on should have taken them to a different place internally as well as externally. And I just kind of wanted a little bit more from it. I also would say that the final like confrontation or like just the ending of the story kind of felt like out of left field a little bit, because you're kind of heading in this one direction with these certain people for a while, and then this like bit of information kind of comes in the last like 20% of the book, and that is what leads to the ending of the book. And I just felt that, I don't know, I guess I wanted a little bit more from it. But I feel like I'm not being very articulate. I did enjoy this book, and I think it's definitely worth reading, especially if you're a Stephen King fan, or if you want to try some Stephen King but you don't really want to read his horror, because there's really no horror here at all. It's definitely like a thriller. You know, I guess I just wanted a little bit more from this book, in my opinion. For me, I'm gonna go with a 3.5 for this book. On a good day, I might be able to bring it up to a 4. I'm gonna let it sit for a while before I really settle. I do enjoy this book, and I do recommend it, but it's not my favorite Stephen King. I'd say it's definitely like middle of the road King for me. Okay, so now let's go ahead and jump into my thoughts on The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This book is gonna be really, really hard to talk about without getting into spoilers, because it's like all spoilers. Like most of the book is like a big spoiler. And so I'm gonna be really vague. I'm going to communicate my thoughts as effectively as I can. But honestly, all you need to know is that I give this book my stamp of approval. It is definitely worth picking it up. It is wild, it is twisted, it goes in a lot of directions I didn't see coming, and it was one of the most compelling reads that I've read all year. So The Last House on Needless Street follows a man who lives in a house on Needless Street, and the windows are boarded up, and he just kind of keeps to himself, and you get his perspective. But you don't just get his perspective, you also get the perspective of his cat, and of his daughter, and of a woman who moves onto the street to kind of investigate him. And the reason she does that is when she was growing up, her sister went missing, and the man who lives on the street was a suspect in the disappearance of her sister, but he's since been cleared, but she doesn't quite believe that he is all that he says he is. This book was really insane. I wouldn't say that it's like a horror book at all. I think it's advertised as being like a horror. And actually, funny enough, Stephen King blurbed it. But it's not horrifying. I would say it's unsettling for sure, and I would say that it is unpredictable. And I would even say that, you know, it keeps you in suspense to a certain extent. And there were some moments I was listening where like it had my attention 100%. I was just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But it was not horrifying or scary in my opinion. Other than the fact that some truly horrifying things happen, but it wasn't like I'm scared listening to this, you know? And I don't typically get scared when I'm reading to or listening to books, but take that as you will. The thing that I appreciated about this book is that, you know, the author does a really good job of making you think that you know what's going on, even when, like, you know that whatever's on the surface level is not what's going on. You kind of start to make connections in your brain. You're like, okay, well, this is probably actually happening, or okay, this is probably actually happening. And then that's not what happens. You know, it goes in a different direction. And I think that the way that that is done is really, really amazing. I also really liked just the writing. I thought that it was really well done. You really get, you know, unique perspectives in this book. Side note, you should totally listen to this on audiobook. I had an ebook copy of it as well, but I'm really glad that I didn't read the ebook and I listened to it instead, because it's narrated by one person but he does all the voices. He does the man voice, he does the cat voice, he does the young girl's voice, he does the neighbor's voice, he does all of them, and he does them so spectacularly well that I thought it was a different person that was reading, but then I was like, oh wait, no, it's just the one person. That's crazy. And so yeah, I highly recommend you checking that out on audio because the audio version of this was really well done. If I had to say things that I didn't like about this book, I would say that the pacing at the beginning was kind of strange. I wouldn't say that it immediately hooked me, but once it did hook me, it did not let go. I appreciated the messages that this author was trying to state in this story, because it's not like just your average run-of-the-mill like horror story. I think it's also very much like an eye-opening experience to read. That being said, I do feel like it could have been communicated a little bit more clearly, because there's like an afterword where the author kind of delves into the reason behind writing this story. And while I feel like that is central to the story that's going on here, I think that honestly, she could have been a little bit more heavy-handed, and it would have done not only the subject matter justice, but it would have done the story justice as well. It would have made it even more powerful. In addition to that, I felt that the conclusion of this book was one of the weaker aspects of it. I liked a lot of the things that were happening leading up to the ending, and I was really excited for where it was going. But I personally felt that the ending lacked a little bit of the oomph that was present in the rest of the story. But those are my thoughts on The Last House on Needless Street. For this book, I'm feeling like a 4.25. I think it deserves a bit more than a 4, but I don't think it's quite at a 4.5. And maybe if I was being a little bit more harsh on it, I'd give it a 4, but I really enjoyed this book and it surprised me a lot. So yeah, it was definitely worth the read. But that is my review for both Billy Summers by Stephen King and The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I do recommend that you read both of these books. I think that they are both worth your time. And while neither of them were 5-star books for me, I would not bat an eye at somebody else giving either of these books 5 stars because they were both really well done. But that's all for this video. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and make sure you stick around because I post videos on every Tuesday and Friday and sometimes on Saturday if I'm feeling extra. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't be a stranger, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!